We're trapped! They've got us pinned from both sides!
We're trapped. They've got us pinned from both sides.
A choked cry crackled over the radio, echoing against the cliffs of Black Canyon, Colorado. A SEAL team was caught in a storm of gunfire, no comms, no sniper cover, no way out. They knew every passing second meant another life slipping away. Then suddenly, from an unseen ridge, a lone bullet tore through the air, saving them in an instant. But what stunned the entire unit wasn't that single shot, it was the true identity of the one who had pulled the trigger. Her name was Avery Hale, 36 years old. The public record was clear: weapons maintenance technician at Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. After a few temporary rotations through White Sands and then Gunnison for ballistic testing, she had settled here like a quiet shadow drifting across the chain of bases stretching from the south to the Rockies. People called her the Gun Girl, a nickname half in jest, half in pity, laced with a hint of dismissal. The fixed image: a slight woman in a brimless cap, a pair of black aviator sunglasses that never came off under the high country Sunday. Every morning her rhythm repeated, precise as a metronome. Walking along the gun test benches with an old M82A, one Barrett slung over her shoulder, its barrel wrapped in frayed cloth. She buried herself in the work, running barrel harmonics, resetting zero, noting everything in pencil in a weathered leather notebook. People saw her touch, measure, and record. But they never saw her shoot. No one had ever caught Avery with her eye pressed to a live fire scope. So the joke spread. Staff Sergeant Rudd, the heavy-voiced authority of the training cadre, dropped it like lead. Bet she couldn't hit the side of a barn past 100 meters. The room roared, laughter bouncing off the walls. Avery only smiled politely, nodding as if to agree. No pushback, no flex, no boast. And that very restraint left her, forgotten. To the young troops, Avery was just an awkward civilian in uniform, tidy, harmless, irrelevant. While they hauled rifles out to the range, shouting, firing, celebrating each burst, she returned to her shop and bent over steel parts the size of a fingertip, wiping them down as if they were her whole world. The recruits shook their heads. All she does is polish optics. In that miniature society where worth was measured by scores, speed, and training records, Avery was nearly invisible. No medal citations, no battle stories, no legendary call sign whispered in the mess hall, only a few dry lines in her file: barrel inspection technician. Yet anyone who looked closer noticed oddities. Each morning, the rack of training rifles was aligned almost perfectly. Wind, humidity, pressure, details even seasoned shooters often ignored had already been quietly accounted for. No one saw her do it, but the results were plain. Recruits began to mutter, "If the weather's bad and the rounds drift, ask the gun girl." Others observed how, in crowded briefings, Avery always sat near the exit. Behind those aviators, her gaze never rested still. It scanned rooftops, windows, shadows at the back like someone guarding a battlefield no one else could see. A few hardened veterans caught the strangeness, then brushed it off. Because if she truly were something else, surely her file would say so. In that cramped workshop, Avery was like a silent conductor. Rifles disassembled around her formed a symphony, and her hands moved with rhythms forged by thousands of repetitions under pressure. When she ran a patch down a barrel, the movement flowed impossibly smooth. When she locked an optic into place, her breath slowed, steady, an inner cadence old soldiers recognized but couldn't quite name. The strangest part wasn't her mechanical skill, but the way she moved. Avery drifted like smoke. No sound, no trace. More than one recruit jolted when they realized she had been standing beside them all along. Some laughed nervously, others flushed red, but all felt a subtle unease. In her corner stood a gray steel cabinet, old locked tight. Every other tool and part lay in the open, within easy reach. But never that cabinet. No one had seen it opened. People assumed it just held odds and ends. A few curious souls asked, but Avery would only smile. Nothing in there. A smile as light as air, neither confirming nor denying. While the base spun on medals, awards, and viral clips from the training field, Avery chose the opposite path, quiet, unseen, and so she became invisible. Yet within that invisibility lay signs small but undeniable. She wasn't just polishing rifles. She was watching. She was listening. And maybe, just maybe, she was waiting. All right. Before you settle in, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely vibing with what I'm putting out here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. That morning, the wind shifted strangely. The upper layers blew diagonally from the Ozarks down into the valley. The rookies' fresh faces, barely broken into camp, suddenly noticed something odd. The entire row of training rifles had been adjusted half an MOA off from the day before. The humidity chart clipped beside the wind gauge had also been moved, matching precisely the terrain-driven gusts sliding down the hillside. Stranger still, every optic diopter had been fine-tuned to the eyesight of each shooter, as if someone had listened to the wind with their ears and measured the light by instinct. No one spoke it aloud, but the meticulous detail left them unsettled. A regular technician didn't do things like this. Colonel Whitaker, in charge of joint training, was the first to spot the pattern. He was used to reading subtleties in the briefing room glances, posture, seating. And with Avery, he saw something impossible to ignore. In every meeting, she angled her chair toward the doorway, the reflex of someone who had lived in places where a door meant sudden danger. Her gaze wasn't mere nervousness. It was the vigilance of someone who had survived outside the wire. In the machine shop, every tool lay in the open, free for anyone to use. But in the far corner stood something different. A gray steel cabinet, locked tight. Its surface was scratched, the handle worn bright. No one had ever seen it open. For everything else, Avery was casual, even careless. But with that cabinet, she was absolute. The imbalance made it a question mark that seemed to hang in the air above the workshop. Other clues revealed her true nature. She quietly gathered wind gauges left behind after testing, without a word. A left-handed rookie found his carbine returned with the safety lever swapped to the left side. On a training bench, someone discovered a scrap of paper with a penciled note. Don't trust GPS when the mirage rises after 10 a.m. No name, no mark, but the neat, dark strokes of graphite were unmistakably Avery's. These weren't the acts of a thoughtless technician. They were the habits of someone who had seen small errors spiral into tragedies, quietly preventing others from repeating them. On still afternoons, a passerby might catch a strange sight. Avery standing alone at the empty range, listening to the rustle of wind through the trees. No rifle, no gear, just her eyes behind dark lenses fixed on the distance, as if she was measuring coordinates not with instruments, but with memory. Some rookies joked she looked like a fortune teller reading the breeze. But sharper veterans grew quiet, because they knew that look, the look of someone who had read a battlefield by sound and the scent of earth. Once, after a brutal training session, a young rookie collapsed, pale with dehydration. While others hesitated, Avery stepped in, no shouting, no orders. She pressed a cold water bottle into his hand at the very moment his pulse was faltering. Then she turned away, saying nothing. To the rookies, it was nothing more than a small gesture. But those with experience understood. Not everyone could spot that imbalance before it became a crisis. In her invisibility, she had just saved a life without anyone realizing it. Slowly, the image of the gun girl began to fracture. No longer just a nameless technician, but a figure holding something untold. The quiet gestures, the unseen adjustments, the anonymous notes, all of it built into a larger question. Who was she, really? The radio, normally reserved for logistics, suddenly crackled to life, shattering the steady quiet of the morning. The signal was warped, broken like wind hissing through wire. Mixed within came ragged, gasping breaths, the sharp yank of a bolt, the dry clack of a magazine locking into place, and the steady hiss of electromagnetic interference. These were not the sounds of a peaceful training base. They carried the metallic scent of a real battlefield. From deep inside the canyon, a voice echoed back, strangled and desperate. All sniper assets down, no overwatch. Ammo running low. No one else in the shop heard it but Avery. Only she kept this side channel open, a habit no one understood. In that instant, the entire room seemed to freeze. Avery stood motionless at her workbench. Her cloth gloves were still smudged with gun oil. Slowly, her hand settled on the handle of the third drawer. To anyone else, it looked like any other. But inside was something she hadn't touched in 2 years. When her fingers hooked it open, the sound of metal rang out dry and low, and memories came flooding back. Wrapped in worn fabric lay a combat knife, its blade dulled by time. On the hilt was carved W.12. The cuts were uneven but deep, deliberate like something etched hastily in the smoke of battle by a hand trembling but resolute. To others, just an old knife. To her, it was the last fragment of a unit erased in Badlands Echo. Her gaze slid across the room and stopped at the gray steel cabinet. For 2 years it had stayed shut, silent as a tombstone in the workshop, visible to all, but never approached. Inside was a part of her life, locked away, labeled Never Return. She keyed in the code. Each number pressed was like a heartbeat tightening in her chest. The door opened with a faint hiss, as if reluctant to be disturbed. In the dim light appeared a weapon with no official name, HTR-47, the kind soldiers only whispered about, like a ghost. Its earth-toned finish lay smooth as desert dust. No logo, no serial number. No records. An off-the-books rifle. No one knew it existed, except those who had once relied on it. Avery's hand touched the stock. Cold, yet so familiar it hurt. Half of her wanted to recoil, the other half wanted to hold on forever. She lifted it out, cradling it like an old friend awakened from a long sleep. For a moment, faces flickered before her. Teammates alive, eyes lit with laughter in damp bunkers, the scent of earth after sandstorms. Then the final scene, Badlands Echo, everything erased in minutes. Only she remained, carrying wounds that never showed on skin. The HTR-47 was both evidence and sentence. It reminded her that she lived, and they did not. Every time she thought of touching it, Avery felt she was betraying the silence she had sworn to the dead. But this morning, the broken voice over the radio shattered that vow. She set the stock down on the bench. Wood striking steel made a faint sound, yet it was enough to change the air in the room. Behind her aviators, her eyes closed. When they opened again, they were different, cold, sharp, but not without feeling. The eyes of someone who had once carried a team on her shoulders and was about to do it again, even if only this once. Avery whispered, the words leaving her lips like breath, meant for no one but herself. Not to boast, only so someone else can live. The words broke apart, the first crack in the wall of silence she had built for 2 years. And once a crack had formed, the entire past threatened to surge through, sweeping away every disguise. Above, wind scraped across the old tin roof, dragging out a long howl. Below, in the workshop, Avery tightened her grip on the HTR-47, feeling its familiar weight settle against her shoulder. It felt both like a burden and like coming home. Her body's movements, from stance to breath to heartbeat, clicked back into rhythm, as though they had been waiting all along for this rifle to wake them. Avery left the workshop without reporting to anyone. Her footsteps were light, as if the whole base were still asleep, and only she remained awake. The path she chose wasn't a military trail, but a faded, narrow track fishermen sometimes used. It clung to the northern ridge of Black Canyon, winding past juniper brush and sheer cliffs, barely wide enough for a lone figure. To a stranger, it would have been a reckless route, But to Avery, it was a hidden corridor leading to a firing position no one would expect. When she reached the edge of the rock, a natural V-shaped gap opened before her, only 6 to 8 arc minutes wide. A narrow slit, but enough to slice a line of sight down into the canyon floor. Below, the SEALs were pinned. Enemy fire raked across the haze of dawn, streaks of red slicing through the mist. No exit, no overwatch, no allies. Only her and 2,000 meters of air between. Avery pulled the bipod open, setting it neatly on a rusted rail left from an abandoned mine. Steel scraped faintly against stone, the sound carried off by the wind. She checked every factor. The Coriolis effect on the angled shot, the drop in pressure along the contour line, the low mirage rising with a strange gradient as morning fog lifted from the canyon floor. Everything was calculated in her mind, no notebook, no instruments, only memory, instinct, and experience. Her breath slowed, even. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of each potential squeeze of the trigger. Silence pressed in, as though the world itself were holding its breath. The first shot left the barrel, its echo swallowed by the canyon walls. The round slammed into the windshield of the enemy commander. Plexiglass shattered, the chain of command severed. The entire cluster of fighters staggered like a body that had just lost its brain. The second shot followed, striking the gimbal of the Overwatch machine gun. The weapon groaned, snapped, and toppled from its mount. The barrage that had trapped the SEALs went silent. A moment of emptiness, so precious it could be traded for lives. The third shot, the most delicate, threaded through rock to hit the relay dish. The enemy's mesh network blinked out, like a door slammed shut. Their communications collapsed into chaos. At the canyon floor, the SEAL team held their breath. They had no idea who was firing, from where, or how the shots could be that precise. Rudd, the one who had once mocked Avery, muttered over the internal channel, "What asset is covering us? There's no sniper in this sector." His voice carried confusion, unease, and a flicker of unexpected hope. Then the auxiliary radio cut in, breaking through their frequency. A female voice, low and clipped. "Spectre 9 is active. Stay low. Hit left in 40 seconds. That was all. No introduction, no explanation. Within the SEAL ranks, a young soldier whispered to his teammate, his voice trembling, "That name? I thought it was just a legend from Ramadi." Eyes locked across the squad, wide with disbelief. Ramadi, where rumors told of a phantom sniper who once pulled an entire unit from a kill box. Soldiers traded that tale in dim bars, dismissing it as myth. Now the myth was speaking directly into their ears. On the ridge above, Avery didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her eyes stayed fixed to the scope, her hands moving with the precision of countless repetitions. She swapped magazines with smooth, practiced grace. Metal touched metal with the soft chime of piano keys warming up for a deadly symphony. It was the only sound in the heavy stillness of the stone wilderness. Wind whipped across the ridge, tugging strands of hair loose from beneath her cap. The morning sun bled through the mist, turning it into a shimmering veil. Amid that vision, the woman once dismissed back at base now sat firmly in place, turning the entire Black Canyon into a silent stage for her return. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. For 42 minutes, Avery didn't squeeze the trigger to count bodies. She fired to rearrange the battlefield, a quiet kind of art that only someone who had lived through it would dare to attempt. The first shot in that sequence didn't take a life. It severed the ammo feed, locking up the enemy's heavy machine gun like a beast suddenly robbed of breath. The gunner pounded on the weapon in panic, but it was useless. The screech of jammed belts mixed with desperate shouting merging into a chaotic, broken harmony. Next, she picked out a man lining up on the medic. The barrel shifted just a fraction, dipped slightly lower. The round didn't pierce his heart, didn't kill it, punched clean into his shoulder. He toppled backward, weapon falling, eyes wide in shock. The medic looked up, stunned to realize he was still alive. That 1 second stretched into a lifetime. Then, like another sharp note in the invisible score, she fired into the enemy's IR strobe pouch used to mark targets for the UAV. It burst into a flash, creating a false signal on the control screen. The drone banked away, striking the decoy point, while the SEAL team slid silently through the rocks. Every shot was a decision. No waste, no error. Her breath was steady as a metronome, locking each motion in rhythm. In Black Canyon, the wind shifted with every contour. A sudden swirl could send a bullet wide by meters. But Avery read the air through signals most would dismiss. The rustle of grass in a crevice, the faint shimmer at the sight post, or the thin mirage quivering on the stone's edge. In that chaotic world, she turned every sound and flicker into a secret language only she understood. And through that language, she translated the battlefield into a short, precise symphony. Below, the SEALs began to move. They slid along the dry stream bed, pressed themselves into blind spots the enemy couldn't reach. Gunfire thinned out, replaced by ragged breaths and the crunch of gravel under boots. 7 men survived. 3 were wounded but still moving, still with a chance to leave the canyon alive. For a unit 1 seconds from annihilation, it was nothing short of a miracle. By the time reinforcements arrived, the scene looked like an abandoned stage. The enemy had fled in disorder as if yanked about by invisible hands. No sniper's body was found. No one saw her. Only one sound lingered in their memories, the faint metallic click, like piano keys in a desert of stone. Then silence, and it was that silence that saved them. Later, in the after-action report, a SEAL scrawled the final line with a trembling hand. We never saw her, only heard the click of metal, then nothing, and that silence saved us. On the ridge above, Avery sat alone. The gun smoke drifted off, her breathing steady. Yet inside, something heavy finally slid away. In each spared shot, in each choice to preserve life instead of end it, she felt herself learning forgiveness. Not only for her enemies, but for herself, the one who had carried the wound of Badlands Echo for 2 years. The HTR-47 rested against her shoulder like a memory redeemed, and for the first time in years, she didn't see it as a sentence, but as an instrument of salvation. Fort Carson convened an emergency AAR the very next morning. The briefing room was sealed tight, fluorescent lights glaring down on the long wooden table, the air heavy like a court-martial. On the screen, choppy footage from a jammed quadcopter flickered. Pixelated fragments, then suddenly freezing on the image of a lone figure lying prone on an abandoned rail line. No armor, no insignia, just a compact silhouette, rifle braced on a bipod, firing with thermal inversion technique, something only the most elite units had ever been taught. No one in the room spoke. The silence thickened with disbelief. Because everyone knew, an ordinary technician could never have turned Black Canyon into a chessboard and controlled every piece for 42 minutes. Colonel Whitaker personally ordered the J-code unlocked. A buried file surfaced, each line cold and clinical, like engravings on a tombstone. Name, Avery Hale. Codename, Spectre Security, Level 9. Unit, Wraith 1. 2. Unofficial. Note, 1 shot, 6 lives. Operation, Badlands Echo. The final line stamped in red, total team loss after intelligence compromise, recommendation for promotion divided by decoration, declined, personal request, reassignment to rear echelon, role as technician. Duty, fix what others left behind. The room fell into a hush. A few young officers lowered their heads, ashamed of the times they had mocked her. Whitaker closed the thick folder with a decisive snap. He walked straight out and down to the workshop. The door creaked open. Avery was bent over a receiver, small screws lined neatly across a cleaning cloth. She looked up, removing her aviator shades. Gray eyes tired, steady locked on him. Eyes like a lake before dawn. Calm on the surface, but impossible to gauge the depth. "I'm just a technician." Her voice was low, even more a statement of conclusion than any defense. Whitaker set the folder on the table, unopened, unnecessary. He answered softly, almost a whisper. "Number, you're Spectre 9. In the workshop, golden light fell across rows of optics laid face down like waiting shells. Receivers split open, steel innards exposed. Avery glanced around, then lowered her voice, gentle as confession. "Now I save lives. I don't take them." It wasn't denial, it was a choice. After Badlands Echo, she had sentenced herself by turning away from the front line, but now, with the truth uncovered, she no longer had to pretend. She chose a different path, to keep others alive. Whitaker nodded, offering no argument. In his eyes, it wasn't retreat but declaration. A different kind of courage. News of the Invisible One at Black Canyon spread faster than any classified report. In the stories of young soldiers, the metallic click became a signal of survival. On military forums, the codename Spectre 9 surfaced again, for the first time in years of silence. A legend once dismissed as barroom rumor in Ramadi was now verified by an after-action report signed by living SEALs. Corrections began quietly. Jokes disappeared. On the test benches, rookies laid out gear more carefully, as if in silent respect. A medic left a fresh water bottle on her desk, no name, but clearly a thank you. Avery gave no reply. She still arrived early, still wrote in pencil, still wore her plain cap without insignia. But one small change did not escape notice. For the first time, she hung her old gloves on the workshop wall, no longer hidden in a drawer. A silent but unmistakable sign she was no longer fleeing the shadow of Spectre 9. She had made it part of her life, to keep living on. Redstone Arsenal once had an old metal sign hanging at its entrance, paint faded, with words carved deep. Death from above. It had stood there for decades, becoming a phrase young soldiers both feared and wore with pride. One morning, that sign quietly changed. No email announcement, no official briefing, no drums or banners. Simply, new words appeared, as if they had always been there. Life from the shadows. A soldier passing by stopped, eyes widening. No one explained, no one protested. Something shifted in the air, subtle yet undeniable. Culture at times isn't rewritten by directives, but by memories that refuse to be erased. At the same time, a thin document began to spread within soft circles. It wasn't a PowerPoint slide, not a long lecture. Just a video under a minute long. Grainy, black and white. 3 shots. 1 breath. Beneath the video were 3 lines of caption, brief to the point of coldness, yet reading like a new charter. Shoot by breath, not by laser. Measure success by lives preserved, not targets killed. If you can stop the enemy from pulling the trigger by your unseen presence, choose that path first. They called it the Spectre 9 method. In Gunnison, where dark cliffs carried the shadow of hawks, a small spot along the ridge became a place where people paused. No plaque, no monument. Just a flat patch of ground, bipod marks etched into stone, and a few rusted casings. Young soldiers came there, standing in silence for a few seconds. No reminder was needed. Only to pause, let their heartbeat slow, to remember there are those who only wish for you to come home. A kind of tribute with no fanfare, no medals. But sometimes, the deepest respect comes in silence. As for Avery, she still chose the workshop as her refuge. But now, when she walked the hallways, no young soldier snickered behind her back. They nodded, sometimes leaving a small note. Thank you. A medic she once saved quietly sent her a unit patch, left on her desk with no words attached. Small gestures, but together they built something undeniable: recognition. Avery hadn't changed much. Still the cap, still the aviators, still the old leather notebook. But there was one subtle difference. On the wooden bench, beside the toolbox, now hung a small plaque. No name, only 3 words carved deep: Spectre 9. On the anniversary of Badlands Echo, a few veterans appeared at the workshop. No invitations, no guest list. They sat together, sipping instant coffee, sharing more silence than words. To them, Avery was more than Spectre 9. She was proof that sometimes the only way to survive is to choose forgiveness. Avery refused the meritorious service ceremony someone had arranged in Huntsville. No wooden podium, no 4-pointed star on her chest, no applause. That day, she sat in the workshop, one hand tightening the screw of a scope ring, the other testing the weight of a trigger exactly like every ordinary Tuesday afternoon. When night fell, she disappeared from Redstone. No leave request, no farewell. Only the faint smell of gun oil lingering on the cloth and the yellow light spilling across the wooden bench. In the drawer where she kept her wind and temperature calibrators, there was now a new mark. A knife had carved deep into the grain. The words rough, trembling, but clear. If you're still breathing, you still have a chance to help someone else breathe. Anyone who found that line fell silent for a few seconds. Some took a photo and sent it to their buddies. Some just closed the drawer, nodding slightly as if they just heard a final instruction. The Coronado mug still sat tilted exactly half an inch on the bench, her habit, to make the light pool where she needed it. Newcomers walking into the shop, without knowing why, instinctively lowered their voices, as if that place were a nameless shrine, and respect needed no directions. From San Diego to Virginia Beach, from Fort Carson to Kirtland, in advanced marksmanship classes, an instructor would sometimes pause mid-lesson, glance at the students, and smile. Spectre 9 never taught us how to never miss. She taught us that the best sniper might not have to fire at all if their very presence is enough to shake the ground. No one argued, because those who had survived Black Canyon knew it wasn't just philosophy, it was truth. Written in blood, in silence, and in breath. And somewhere, on the nameless trails of the Rockies or the Sangre de Cristo, the wind still carried the scent of pine and damp stone. A worn footprint appeared, then vanished. A rifle stock pressed into the earth, soon covered by dust blown from the ridge. Someone passing by laid their cheek to the wood, listening to their own breath, then lifted their finger off the trigger. No shot fired. But down below, someone had just been given another way home. That image never made it into any report, no camera recorded it, but in the small circles from supply clerks to old SEALs, the story of Avery Hale, or rather Spectre 9, kept spreading. Not as a tale of glory, but as a reminder of humanity. That sometimes the choice not to pull the trigger is the most powerful shot of all. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.